if you're a leader, I think people are looking for you in a different way than they did in the past. So don't be afraid, move out of the comfort zone, spend more time on the transformation space. The legacy that you're going to leave is based on the changes that you're making now. It's not what you did in the past. And that means spending time on transformation, building that culture where everything works as co-creation. The teams are empowered, and you're somebody that orchestrates and like you said, take decisions, but let the team also take most of them. And if you're in a transformation team or transformation lead, step up, please. I think you have the right to ask. You have the right to take the things that you need for your project to be successful. You all know why projects fail. You all know why transformation. Don't let failure happen again and again because you are afraid of speaking up and asking what you need. It will make a huge difference. And last one, Aidan, think people first, even in projects. When you have a team, and we know what's the difference between a group of people and a team of committed people, spend the time, create that team, and things will go just flying and people will love you.
You can win a copy of today's book with thanks to our sponsor, Kyndryl, who runs and reimagines the technology systems that drive advantage for the world's leading businesses with a unique blend of AI-powered consulting built on unmatched managed service capability. Kyndryl helps leaders harness the power of technology for smarter decisions, faster innovation, and a lasting competitive edge. You can find Kyndryl at kyndryl.com. What if most project failures were not really about project management at all? In fact, some of the biggest reasons projects fail can't be traced to missed deadlines or flawed Gantt charts. They stem from something much more profound, from leadership blind spots and organizational structures that were never designed to support a world powered by projects. That's what drove today's guest in 2019 to introduce a more disruptive shift, the concept he coined called the project economy. Today, he reimagines organizations and their structures through the lens of projects and emphasizes that projects have become the primary engine of value creation. Each of us, regardless of role or title, is a project manager. Just as everyone has become a project manager, whether they know it or not, every organization is now what he calls a project-driven organization. They just don't behave like one, and that's what today's book is about. The project economy calls for a new kind of leadership and a new organizational model that places projects at the core, one he calls project-driven organizations, PDOs. It represents the next evolution of Agile organization, a 20-year-old concept, while valuable at the time, is no longer sufficient for the scale and complexity of transformation required today. The project-driven model brings together structure, leadership, and culture to enable speed, clarity, and sustained value creation. It is a pleasure to welcome the author of Powered by Projects, Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aidan. A pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. And I got the name right as well. I nailed it.
Yes. Well done. Well done.
Good project management, man. I read a useful book on it recently. I must tell you about it. I was
Thank you.
telling you before we came on air, and I'll give him a shout out. A brilliant guy I know, a regular listener to the show. He's one of the leadership team of Mars, and he works in innovation. Big shout out to you, Rainer. And I was telling him about this book. I was like going, hey man, I'm reading this book. I gotta send you a copy. And I told him a little bit, and he goes, oh yeah, I read a great Harvard Business Review about this idea of the project economy. And I was like, going, that's Antonio. Your work is getting out there, brother.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I really loved about the book was this, that I read a lot of books, as you know,
Yeah.
and I'd never read about transformation or culture, organizational structure through the lens of project management.
Hmm.
And that's what was so interesting, was to go, if I actually put it this way, but my own experience, I wanted to share this with you. When I retired from professional sport, I went into digital transformation, although I didn't call it that then.
Hmm.
But I pretty soon realized that my job was project management. And I asked the leadership team, would they support me to do a Prince 2 course?
Wow.
And they wouldn't fund it. It was only like
No.
$2,000 or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, I probably cost us thousands of euro every
Yes,
month by being terrible project manager, and they wouldn't fund it. But I just thought maybe we'd share this idea of the
exactly.
lens of what you say, reimagining organizations to be project-driven cultures. Maybe we'll open up and give our audience that lens, and then we'll go as deep as we can because you're very kindly joined us from your hotel lobby. But let's get started with that, Antonio.
Thank you, Aidan. So yes, I think the core, the essence of my work has been around how can we make a topic which is not easy when you read the books, when you get a Prince 2, when you get a PMP, they are looking for very technical skills. It's like everybody will need to build a bridge, right, or a nuclear plant, and that's not why we do projects right now. It's for transform, for introducing new technology, and I found that there was a big disconnect between what projects in reality were with the tools and methodologies and books. And that was my goal, just to simplify, to make everybody a good project manager, to make people appreciate projects, because I believe, and I think is what you're doing in your show, Aidan, is projects is like the nicest way to work, right? Because you work with people, you have challenges, like you've done sports, right? I've seen your so when the team plays, there's the satisfaction that you get from that. It's just unbelievable, and you get that when you do good projects. Unfortunately, like it happened to you cannot imagine how many people do projects without even knowing the basics, right? Is imagine you ride cars and nobody has taught you how to ride cars. It's chaos, and this is how most companies are doing today. It's just a chaos. It's just everywhere projects, and there's no proper way to manage them. So it's a great way to start one of my passion topics.
Which is quite obvious, man. Quite
Yeah.
quite obvious. But before we go any further, let's not assume people know what we mean by projects, because you do give a definition of projects and why they hold the key to our future.
Mhm. Yes. So there's always the standard definition by Prince or PMI. It's like there's something that you're changing, you're solving a big problem, you're adding new technology, and there's always a deadline, right? There's a limited budget, there's limited resources, and there's a deadline. And that's kind of the standard definition, which is fair, it's okay. But for me, the more motivational view of projects is your projects are your future as an individual, as a family member, as your own business, working for a big company, working for the region, for the countries. Every project represents a building block on the future, right? So there's some projects which are bigger building blocks, some others smaller, but everything builds up to create your future. And I think that's so exciting. I have to tell you honestly, that was not my invention. It came from Harvard Business Review chief editor Adi Ignatius, who wrote about projects and said projects are your future. But there's nothing more beautiful than working on the future.
You share so many stories throughout the book, so
Mhm.
many case studies of companies that have done well, companies that have done not so well. But let's share the relatively recent 2022 case of the global professional services giant EY Ernst& Young, who set out to execute a sweeping corporate transformation, splitting the consulting arm from the audit division and trying to create two separate firms. I'd love you to share this, both the rationale behind why they did it, and then what happened, what was called Project Everest, and turned out to be quite like Everest.
Yes. Well, this is something that the case illustrates what happens almost everywhere, right? You can have, and I think we have the ability to build good plans now. We have the knowledge. There's lots of lessons learned. We are people who can develop good plans. We can have a really detailed structure. We can have all the details of the project can be well defined. The problem is that is that's not enough, and that's what I'm covering in this new book is you need culture, you need alignment with senior leaders. And what happened in this case with Ernst and Young is that the plan was perfect, the execution failed because of the culture and the ego approach to this. People were fighting for their turf, so there was no collaboration, and if there's no collaboration at the top, nothing works at the bottom. So it's a really good case. I love it because it's a company that provides consulting service around execution transformation, but they were not able to talk the talk because of that personal culture, which is not about teamwork. It's about your own turf, and that created the friction and the misalignment, and the project was a mess, like you said, like climbing the Everest, and it was a disaster.
There's another contrasting one. So if EY was cultural, this one was structural, and this was Nike's digital transformation between 20 and 2024. And in the 4 years following the start of the pandemic, the company accelerated its shift from direct to consumer model. So they'd invested heavily in e-commerce, digital platforms, consumer data analytics. What was so tragic about this one was they looked to be doing everything right. They'd put a lot of things in place, including the culture, but this was structural. Maybe you'll share this.
Yeah, so that's the other case I start in the book as well. So another very successful company with, in this case, like you said, they work on the culture, but they forgot that in order to transform your company, you need to organize yourself differently. That means also shifting roles, shifting responsibilities, shifting the power more to the teams, not in the top. So the governance was a big issue. So in the end, is the other side of the picture, right? Culture is the soft elements, what is the values that you show, the leaders follow, but then the structure is also very important. I always say that, Aidan, today most of the companies they're still built for 50 years ago, right? Unless you're a startup or you or me who have a very flat model and we can react. Most of the established business they're still very hierarchical, and that's a nightmare. When you were doing probably transformation work, you struggle because we don't share resources. We still work in the same company, but I don't help you because I need to help myself first, and it's a mess. So the structure has a big impact on how you share resources, how people instead of working part-time in your projects, they jump and work full-time, and that makes a huge difference. So that's the structural aspects that we often didn't look like them, like you said, we looked at them, but not from a project or transformation angle. And that's what I brought with this new book.
It's interesting that one because many people who listen to the show work in transformation and
Yeah.
innovation. And I find those type of people, by their very nature, are giving, are sharing, are open to collaboration, giving
Yes.
away the credit, all those things.
Yeah.
But there's a line by Demings. He said that a bad system will always beat a good person. And
Yes.
and that's what
I
came to
know.
mind there because it feels like you failed, but actually it's that the company failed you. It can be the company's culture or structure that failed you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that has been recently on the show a lot was the idea of re-architecture of the organization,
Yeah.
both physically and mentally, because of AI. And I
Mm.
thought maybe we'd share a little bit about that before we go any further.
Sure. I think this is I don't know which one is more challenging, Aidan, from what I've seen where I help companies. I think the culture can be shaped. I think you just need to have the right people. But structure is always a bit more challenging. Is letting go the past. Is you might have a team of 40 people and suddenly they're not your team anymore, and you're part of a bigger group and you work as an orchestrator, which doesn't mean that people see you up, but see you at the same level. So I think for me that has been always the most difficult change is because it's very visible. It's suddenly the org chart disappears and we start working as teams. And the CEO of Bayern, Bill Anderson, when he joined 2024, he was one of his biggest bets is let's dismantle the hierarchies and all these approval steps and let's work more as a team, and I'm watching that. I think it's not easy, but at least he's trying and seriously trying to break down those silos, which is things from the past. I think they were very useful in the past. They're not much needed now. And just a small comment on that. Not the whole company needs to be restructured. I think there's some parts of your business that can still be run like they were run for 100 years, but the transformation piece, that those things need to move and work in a different setting.
Antonio, maybe a little word on how AI is accelerating this
Mm.
for organizations.
Well, AI is just going to. I have a nice slide which is very shocking. So, in an organization, mm, good size or middle size, they have two parts, and we talked about this before. Ambidexterity, no, is running your business, your assets, exploiting your assets, and that's run by people. And then you have the change part, exploration, the project side, and I think AI and robots too, Aidan, robots are going to be running most of your operations, and we're not talking about finance and we're not talking about logistics. That's already happening. But core part of your business, sales, marketing, even finance, you'll see robots who have AI built on them who can do a lot of the things. I work with a big luxury company who French company, global company. They sell and part of their core operations is hairdressers because they sell shampoo for your hair and you look beautiful. Then maybe you use using them because your hair looks perfect.
That's AI. That's AI.
So basically, the whole debate with the C-suite is okay, but our sales channel is not going to be disrupted by AI and robots because people go to a hairdresser and they like to see people cutting your hair. And I show them a video of a robot who's hairdressing now, and it's real. It's not AI. So most of the things that we think will never be touched by AI and robots, they will be, and they will be faster than what we think. So the question to your audience is, if you're doing the same job every day and with the same people every day, that job will go. That job will go in 12 months. So think about what skills you need to build together with AI to find your potential, to find your new space.
I think it's such an important thing, and there's so many people with their head in the sand. You know,
Wow.
this whole idea of it's not good enough. It's not there.
Yes.
But we're like going, yes, it's not good enough yet. And
Yes.
I think
Yes.
they think we're scaremongering saying that, but it's probably because we're a little bit closer to it or we see it
Yes.
slightly different. But there's a brilliant line you write here, and I'd love to share this. And this is the type of taste of the writing in the book. You write that organizations today face challenges that agile frameworks were never designed to address.
Yeah.
Entire industries are being redefined overnight. AI and advanced analytics are collapsing decision cycles. Customers and employees expect personalized, real time experience. In this new context, PDOs, project designed organizations, represent the next logical evolution, re-architecting the business itself around dynamic, empowered, cross-functional project teams. I thought it would be really useful to take our audience on a quick journey of how we got to where we are. And I
Mhm.
have a table from the book, if it's okay to share.
Sure, sure, you can share,
And
Aiden.
maybe you could talk to that, and we'll have a bit of empathy for the people who are only listening to us. Again, as I always remind our guests, most people are listeners rather than viewers on
Yeah.
YouTube. So I'm just going to share this on the screen, Antonio.
Okay, so here, this is one of the most important tables in the book, and it shows the evolution of the organizational concept. So we have been very much focused on operation driven for the last century or more. Then we had this agile movement, which I think was great. It just really helped to move faster, especially at the team level. But we noticed that this was stagnating. So still the number of transformation failing was huge, even if they were using Agile. Then that's where I thought of about this concept project driven, where put projects are at the front, right? So this is really when you have to decide, do I run the operations or do I spend more time on projects? You spend the time on the projects that you create the value for the future. So the table is quite extensive, but maybe just cover a couple of lines here. So the focus was before efficiency, stability, and control, and we live that. I think you live that. I lived that when I was at corporates, where the focus is efficiency, stability, and the managers are there to control you, that the things get done. Agile introduced speed and flexibility at team level, so at the bottom, nothing changed at the top. And this is really on project driven is where enterprise wide transformation drives the project. So this is really about constant transformation. You get your best people to do transformation work. You have the best leaders supporting those transformations so the projects become the core. How do you create value? Operations driven was about cost. So this is all driven by finance people, cost optimization, productivity gains, and operational leverage. That was the past. Agile, what was the value there? Faster time to market, iterative customer value delivery, and improved responsiveness. What happens now when you look at the project driven organization design? This is about strategic execution and innovation at scale, right? And dynamic resource allocation. This is one of the bigger challenge items we can take later, is why people are afraid to jump into a transformation full time. Why most of the people prefer to stay in operations and spend 2 days a week in a project, or this is not happening project driven. You can jump in a project for 9 months and then you'll get something else afterwards. There's a bit of uncertainty, but the company guarantees that when the projects are over, you keep focusing on project work. Maybe just the last part I want to cover is the culture. So, how was the culture for operations driven? Standardization and risk aversion. And you talk about innovation. I think this is a killer that we were talking earlier. Most of the projects today, they have incremental improvement ideas, which is appalling for me. So that was the past. If you take a risk and you fail, it's your fault and you might get fired.
Brilliant job, man. Brilliant job. And I just want to again thank you. I know you're traveling with your family and you've kindly taken time out of your schedule. So
Finally.
I and then I come along, man. Well, you're looking good. You're looking relaxed as
Thank
well.
you.
So and it's not AI. But we've heard of the term change fatigue, and for me, the that term always subtly suggests that people are the problem, that they've had enough or they're resisting the change in some
Mhm.
way. But there was a key point you made in the book that points to a much more widespread issue. You say senior leaders frequently initiate too many projects and transformations simultaneously. Thus, they strain the resources and cause critical initiatives to compete for limited attention, funding, and personnel. When every project is a priority, none truly is, resulting
Yeah.
in diluted focus and fragmented efforts. I thought that was a key thing that is rarely said out loud.
Yes.
And the other thing you see, I don't know if you see this yourself, Antonio, is the leadership team may be great at delegating, but they delegate down, and the
Yeah.
people in the middle are drowning because they're like,
Yeah.
"We're getting delegated," and there may be a lack of psychological safety where they can push back and kind of go, "I got too much on my plate here," because it
Yeah.
looks like you're failing, and then if there's a competing job market, you're afraid to say anything.
Exactly. I think that's the bigger issue when you look at companies and I have a funny way to look at this, which is part of my workshop. Aidan, is I ask the leadership team is on average, how often do you launch new initiatives and projects in your company? And the leadership teams, they think that that's their job, right? Is we're strong, we take risks, we are entrepreneur, so we launch one new project every 4 weeks. We have like just we're a machine of launch. But so that's great. And say, how often do you finish or kill projects? And they look at each other and they say, when was the last time we finished the last? Paul, you remember? No, I don't remember. So if you just as a leader launch more projects than you finish, you're a bad leader. That's it. Because your role is not about launching projects, it's about finishing them and then prioritizing. Tell your company what are the top 3 things they need to focus. You cannot imagine how frustrating it is to talk to the leadership team to ask them what's your top 3 transformations or initiative, and they cannot answer. With that is already, if the people at the top don't prioritize, like you say, they dump all the problems to the people, the middle managers, and they struggle. This is something that I insist very much in the book. A good leader today is the one that says no many times and says, focus on that, and I will be there to support you and remove any blockers. That's it. And so that's the rule I put in place. Uh, Next time you launch a new project, before that, say which 2 or 3 we're going to finish. And that just sends a message to the people saying, finally, they're doing this job, these people at the top. Finally, they earn their money. right? Because they tell us where to focus, and that's so, and that makes job much more interesting. So it's just a big issue.
Huge issue. And then the other one was that if you think about leadership teams, they're often really clear on the strategic vision
Mm.
and where the company's going, the strategy, etc. But they're not clear on telling the rest of the organization. And you say that that
Yeah.
gap can manifest as unclear or conflicting objectives, insufficient sponsorship, inadequate support from executive leaders, or a lack of
Mhm.
timely decision making or guidance when project teams encounter obstacles. So that idea of becoming almost like the chief vision officer, chief storytelling officer becomes so important. But one of the things I find from working with leaders is they think that they're saying it and they think that everybody knows about it. But as you go down the organization, the message becomes less and less clear. But
Yes,
you
yeah.
highlight as a PDO, this is absolutely essential.
It's essential, Aidan, and you just said it. So my only point that I want to stress is in a PDO, one of the most important words that we use is co-creation. Co-creation means that the people at the top, they don't take all the decisions. They don't need to be the smartest. They don't need to be always right. The whole thing is co-created, and the projects come from below, and the sponsors at the top are the one that prioritize. Say, this is not the right time. This is not a project, but we launch an experiment. Most of the AI projects today, they're experiments. Why do we call it projects if we don't know where we're going? So that just creates a lot of frustration, a lot of waste, and then people get just depressed. But the co-creation helps you to understand that it's all about the team. It's all about the ideas win, not the hierarchy wins. And when a leader understands that, then everything gets easier because you have been part of the creation. So you don't need to communicate that much because you already were in the process from the beginning. And it's so beautiful because they become big ambassadors. Everybody defends, and the most important, they're proud of what they're doing. And they go home and they tell their wives or husbands, listen, I'm doing this and I just feel so good.
Love that. I think it's so
Mm.
important that every single person feels they're contributing towards that bigger
Ah,
picture rather than just coming and doing tasks every day, that
yeah,
they're actually achieving something. And I just want
yeah.
to remind our audience, I have a copy of this beautiful book up for grabs. If you're just a member of our Substack, you will be in a win with a chance of just winning it. So brilliant book. And I wanted to just point out something. I thought this was so interesting. Many of us experienced this, the great resignation that followed COVID-19.
Mm.
And what was so interesting was what you said, that it was also due to a shift towards project-based work, because
Hmm.
now all of a sudden we were removed from each other and you had to be a project manager.
Yeah.
And according to organizational strategist, a guy called Michael Mankins, the phenomenon was not solely a result of the pandemic, but rather a continuation of a trend driven by factors such as reshuffling of the work stack. But this was all just exasperated by the impact of COVID on working dynamics. I thought that was interesting, and maybe you'd share a little bit about that.
Well, I think there were we saw with the COVID, we saw the good thing because when COVID just exploded, I would say almost all organizations that survived became PDOs. They they ruthlessly prioritize. They stop projects like 80-90% of the projects because they had to focus. So the focus was becoming digital, becoming online, let people work virtually, and things that would. I work with business schools. They had all online learning for 6 years. They didn't do it. They did it in a couple of weeks. That happened with every because you put focus, you get the best people, leaders know what to do, they're there. So we saw how by becoming PDOs, you really went through the biggest crisis ever in the world and you survived with the business. But then when everything settled, companies felt like, oh, we need to do so many things now. We need to launch, let's take the projects that we kill, let's bring them, let's put more. And there's nothing worse for someone to be working in 5, 6, 7 projects. I think we all love to work on one or two, maybe. But what happened during the Great Resignation, there were so many projects launched, and people just got burned out. There was no focus. They didn't know where to put their efforts. And you had a deadline every week and it was pressure. And so that's, I think, what I say is the COVID show us the best and the worst of these models.
Antonio, one of the great examples you give, so you give many in the book. So you
Yeah.
talk about William Gore and Son, we talk about Hire, but you talk about, and you mentioned him there, Bill Anderson's current transformation at Bayer. The reason I wanted to just share this up front is because I wanted to then show the blueprint that you provide in the book as well. But let's lead with a good example, and then I'll show the blueprint on screen. And again, we'll have a bit of empathy for those just listening.
So yes, I think the book is focused on the higher company. So eight I have 8 pillars in the roadmap that you're going to share, the blueprint. And higher show me that you can do them all and you can do them all right. And then Bayern is the company that's kind of very emblematic who's trying to go through this. So they're doing severe changes, true changes on their operating model, on their organizational structure to become PDOs. And you can see that here on the slide. So back to the 3 areas that I cover all the time is the organizational aspects, which is about the culture, is allowing for failing, thinking exponential, working co-creation, organization, flatter, less hierarchy, and governance. Governance is about how do we govern? Where are the decisions taken? 90% of the decisions are taken at the senior level or at the project level, right? If that's the case, you go slow. So I'm saying 90% of the decisions, the transformation team can do that. Can you take a decision of $5 million today without any approvals? That is PDO. Then you have the leadership. I think that's, Aidan, where we need to work a lot is these people have to change the way they work. They love to be in their comfort zone, which is running the business. That's the exploitation of the assets. We need them on the other side. The business can run by itself. We need to have them spending more time sponsorship, prioritizing, and so on. The other aspect is human resources. How can we get a more fluent resources that you move to there full time and then you move to the other side full time? But we don't want people working part time. How come a company I work for, 50,000 employees, they cannot give me 20 people full time for a strategic initiative? Why everybody's part time? And the last part is value creation. We'll keep creating value through operations for sure, but we'll need to create more value through big projects, big bets, innovation that you do so well, Aidan, helping companies. What are those big bets? Those are you crazy projects? I call them are you crazy because I don't know, Aidan, you're an expert on this, but for me, there's no better complement to an idea that you want to launch and somebody says, are you crazy? Those are the projects you need to bet, right? So that's the last part. That's the 8th pillar about value creation.
Brilliant. Easy to do.
Yeah.
But I think, one of the things when you read this book is you realize that it's a non-negotiable this today.
Yeah.
Like,
I love
and
it.
I get it. If you're a leader of an organization, you're close to retirement, you're like going, oh boy, do I really want to go and do all this? But it's a legacy, like you could leave, and like rather than just land the plane gently into your retirement, why not go out
Yeah.
with a bang and create something amazing? But let's dive into reimagining organizations and reimagining the project-driven culture, or reintroducing it in the first place, not reimagining it.
Yeah.
Because you say here, better project management alone is not enough. Often
No.
the missing piece is not the execution, it's the ecosystem. And value is lost not in the delivery process, but in how organizations prioritize, sponsor, adapt, and embed projects into their strategic core. These are not project management problems, they are leadership and organizational design projects. You alluded to this earlier on, which is the habit of stopping projects, because this is such an important part of the book, but is so rare in organizations to properly stop underperforming or misaligned projects because it looks bad. And,
Yeah.
it reminded me of the old idea of the Toyota assembly line where anybody can stop the assembly
Yeah.
line. And I
Yeah.
thought about how Hire can do this in the organization, but they
Exactly.
do it so soon. They do it so soon and so regularly. I thought that was such an interesting shift.
Yeah. 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 So that's one of the examples where you say the people have the power, right? And they if they see something not working, they can stop it. I think you mentioned that at the beginning is that people are a bit afraid with the hierarchy, right? And when I teach, I say, forget about being afraid. Now, companies need people that if you need somebody from the leaders to be a sponsor or to prioritize, you stop the initiative. I stop the transformation, boss, unless you dedicate 2 hours per week. You have now the power, the right, and maybe the obligation to, if you're doing a transformation and you don't have the elements from the top that you need, stop it immediately. You're not doing your job. You're just wasting resources and taking big risks for the company. So I think we need to evolve to those levels when you have your listeners from transformation space, from project space, innovation. You need to step up a bit more because I don't think the people at the top will change as much as we want.
There's a subtle upskill here, you say, required, and this is a transition from delivering projects to being project driven.
Yes.
And I'd love you to share this because, again, just these little nudges in the right direction are how change can initially start.
Well, project driven, I think I always say start small. So take your top one or top two initiative and really empower the teams. Dedicate fully the resources to that team. Be project driven, like what we were talking about the copy. Just get the best people, focus on that project, allow them to take decisions, co-create part of the benefits, part of the idea, get involved and share the benefits and share the success. And that creates every time I've done that, I then it has shown very positive, not just results on that initiative, but the whole company is looking at them and say, I want to be part of that. I hate my old way of working. I want to be part, and that's what I call move from project management to project driven organization. Just for one or two projects, 6 months, the picture will be completely different. Almost guarantee.
When I worked in digital transformation, I used to always say to our team, "We're like Netflix working inside
Yeah.
Blockbuster." And
Yes. I love
what
it. Wow.
what I was trying to do was create this culture. Now, what I did wrong now in retrospect was I kind of created us to be almost like they were the dinosaur, and that in a way that's the wrong way because I create them as kind of the enemy, and in a
Yeah.
way they should be the VC sponsoring
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to be kind of tipping your hat to the
Yeah.
organization and feel like you're in a lesser position. But the reason I share that is you talk about this, and it's such an important thing that even if you're in a toxic organization, many people do work in toxic organizations.
Yeah.
Every project can have its own culture, and you
Ah,
can deliberately start that culture from scratch.
I love that, Aiden. If you did that, bravo on you, because this is something we always miss, is that you have a lot of power in a project or transformation where you can say, okay, we work like that in your day to day. That's fine. But these are the rules that I want to see for this transformation. We're all the same. We're a team. I need you. I want that you are yourself, Aidan. I know you're bright. Come up with ideas. If you feel that you're not secure, just come and tell us. If we're going to succeed, it's because we're going to be working as a team. It's not going to be easy. We know what happens if we don't do it. So let's work on the team first. And this is the culture I want to share. You've lived that when you were doing sports, right? It's so important. Depends on the team you play. You had different culture. It was the coach who was setting those values. You can do that. And I think this will be, if people who listen and focus on this the next week, you're going to see a major change on how the people see them and how the organization see them, and it will impact the result of the project. So good comment.
I thought it was really important. So we won't have time to get all the points across in the book, obviously. But this idea of killing projects or kill criteria also starts at the start. So this even starts before you even start the project to create this cultural habit within inside an organization. And you share a refined approach for this. And I'd love you to dive into this. So set clear evaluation criteria. Two, limit project time frames to 3 to 6 months, and then 3, accelerate closure once the decision is clear. I'd love you to bring us on a whirlwind tour. If there was one little lesson you were going to give us in the middle of your family holiday, what would it be around closing or killing project?
Well, for me, I think the biggest issue that we have in project management for years was we were always seeking perfection. That means everything has to be completed 100%, and then otherwise the project will not finish. What happens is that you finish 90% in your 2, 3 years, and then but then the tail drags forever. So I think a good project transformation leader today is in the one that cuts and say 90% is really good. We're done. We've done. We move on. We still finish whatever it is, but not in a project scenario. We just everybody's free up. We move them to another project. But finishing early is such an important part of good modern project management. The other point that you cover is the killing. The killing is I think there's so many projects that should be killed right now. Aidan, if you look at what happened in the last 6 months or 12 months, most of the technology projects should be considered to be killed, right? Because you started with one technology, and today, do you have the guts? Do you have the way? I think a very important. I wrote a special piece on HVR on this one because most leaders are afraid of killing projects, and so it's you need to have the setup, like we were talking about Toyota, where I'm just a project member. I say, listen, this project doesn't make sense anymore. Let's pause this or let's kill it and let's shift to something else. So creating that cushion of reassurance so that everybody can speak up and say this doesn't make sense anymore is so beneficial, because then people will come up and say, and there will be more arguments about what needs to go, what needs to continue. So those two habits make a huge, huge difference.
You inspired me. I write a weekly article, and this is the one
Yeah,
I'm going to write about.
really.
Idea of killing projects. I actually, my metaphor was this: there's a cat in a convalescent home in, I think it's Rhode Island, and the cat, when it can sense when somebody's about to die. So
Wow.
it's so effective, this cat, that when it goes outside the door of one person's room, they ring the family and say, come along. Because what actually they discovered was cats can smell what are called necromones, which are
Wow.
these pheromones that signal the death of a cell or the death of a
Really?
biological being. And I was like, oh, this is
Wow.
perfect. Somebody in an
Really?
organization is like, this cat can go around smelling projects are dying. But
Yeah.
okay, so we'll kill that project, part one of killing projects, and we'll move on to the next one, which is exponential mindset culture. I
Mm.
love this, and really, what this taught me was the value of thinking big. But there's 3 core principles behind this. Over to you to share this idea.
Well, basically, yeah, it's something that I didn't realize. I was growing. I've been doing corporate projects, transformation for 25 years, and I didn't realize until I stepped back and said, this is all crap. No, why most of the projects are just 10% improvements, and where are our 10x improvement? They were all killed. They were Nobody had the idea anymore, because we won't play safe. We will play safe, and most of companies play safe. And this is so frustrating, because projects allow you the opportunity to create new things, to think big, but we've just killed that because of this culture of risk aversion. And for me, so frustrating. And that's the point about these are you crazy projects. Where are your 3 top are you crazy projects? Those are the ones you need to invest. I was working the other day with a big insurance company, and they kind of got this PDO concept, and they say, yeah, we think that we need to have more crazy ideas, and we have set up a 50 million euro budget for people in the company to bring crazy ideas. But you know what happened, Antonio? We just spent 2 millions. The people just asked for 2 million out of the 50 because they were afraid.
Brilliant. A typical insurance company. How do we
Yeah,
de-risk this?
yeah, yeah. Imagine. So, and the other example I have also very recent with a big bank, a really international bank. They say, we have this group of crazy people who come with crazy ideas, but they go through the budgeting cycle and we kill them all because they're crazy. You cannot prove any And we had this idea of a bank called Revolut. That idea, we had that much before we kill it. Uh, you see, so there's a problem in the culture. There's a problem on the incentives. There's a problem when you remove that and you allow to people think exponential, which is your topic, Aidan. Imagine it's just so you're creating the future through these projects. I think for me, the projects that determine your future are you crazy projects. These are not the incremental ones.
I'm going to share again a table in the book that just shows our audience, and maybe you'll just pick some of your top ones here.
Yeah.
Just the ideas of shifting from incremental to exponential. And there's three core principles. You say you have to have timely decision making to do this. You have to have a culture of continuous learning and thus accepting that stuff will fail, but it's what you learn from the failures.
Yeah.
And then I thought this was really important one, dual speed ambition, which is locking in early value while continuously pursuing larger exponential opportunities that can shift the project's trajectory. They were the three core principles, but this is the table from the book. And again, I'd love you just to pick some of your top ones from this.
What I wanted to put here is examples of the first one, launching a new mobile app, add two new features to existing functionality. This is what 99% of the projects, adding no features, but how can we move into a build a platform supporting 100% third party? That's exponential thinking. For me, is what you were saying is having that focus on value. How can we show value early, even if it's exponential? What will tell us that we're in the right path? Also, thinking exponential allows you to pivot. It doesn't mean that you have it set. These are all experiments, so you can move around. That's why you need that dual kind of approach. One is on value, the other one is on flexibility, so you can keep adjusting your vision and your project into whatever it will take you at the end of the journey. So for me, this is crucial. And the problem for me that I share here is I'm sure if your readers and your followers and listeners, they read the incremental mindset, I'm sure they will be able to recognize most of their projects there, right? So this is for me where the bigger change needs to happen from a project and transformation perspective. And just to finish, Aidan, I'm I'm saying now that if a transformation leader or a project leader receive an incremental idea, he or she has the right to push back and say, come on, we're going to do that. 10%? No, let's think big. Yeah. What would mean if we would start again from zero? What would mean if we remove all the assumptions? What would do? So that's another role because AI is going to do many of the things that we do in transformation and projects. It's already doing that. So where are we going to be adding value? Exactly on this slide here that you're showing, moving from the middle to the right. That's for me a big step into the future.
I love it, man. I was actually, when I was reading this, I was thinking an example I use is just like caterpillars to butterflies. So there's a bunch of caterpillars standing around and kind of going, what are your goals for the year? And like, I'm just going to get a bit bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one caterpillar's like, no, man, I'm going to fly. I'm going to fly. And they're all like going, oh, crazy Jim over here.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about that. This helped me actually realize when I was thinking about how the mindset of different people within an organization, the neurodiversity actually leads to different mindsets, actually leads to different ambitions. And again, a lot of people who work in innovation have bigger views of the world, or maybe they educate themselves slightly differently.
Yes.
And when they do share, I want to be, amidst the caterpillars, they go, I want to fly, or they want to share, instead of incrementally growing the database by 10%, I want to create a community of 10 million followers.
Imagine.
People kind of go, oh man, will you just get real here? Get realistic.
Yes. Yes.
Or what's the immediate goal? And you go, well, maybe we'll increase by, 10% in the next year, but
Yes.
eventually I want to get here. And there's that kind of shift, and this is what the idea of an exponential mindset culture is. There's another example I thought would be useful to share, which is under the leadership of CEO Jesper Brodan. IKEA embarked on this exponential mindset culture. Maybe you give us a little view of that. So here's a good example of one.
Well, IKEA, it's one of these companies that has last and continue reinvention. The example you're talking about is the empowerment of the plants and the shops to take decisions on their own about these new ideas. This was around sustainability. And instead of having the corporate team deciding what should we do to become and reach our sustainability targets, they just told the shops, let the people decide and think exponentially on how can we become more sustainable, how can we sell better, more sustainable products. And it was amazing. They created so many new things from the bottom up, and some of these ideas scaled up and became global changes. But it really was that empowerment to people to think exponentially and in smaller teams closer to the client. So this is usually what is not being done because the innovation comes always from the top. So the IKEA for me was exactly that's what we need.
I love what you write about IKEA here. You say, an exponential mindset builds on the belief that capabilities, whether human, technological, or organizational, can grow dramatically through bold experimentation, learning, and scaled ambition. The exponential mindset is about designing and executing projects that radically accelerate value creation and redefine what the organization believes is achievable. So that's exponential mindset culture. But maybe we'll finish with this one. So, how do we build an open and transparent execution culture? Because here you look at how to enable an open and transparent culture to create the conditions for fast, informed decisions and high trust collaboration across the organization, also de-siloing the organization. And this is where you talk about the importance of embracing experimentation and project failure as a culture.
Well, this is part of that cultural change, right? Transparency means that if you fail, you say you fail. If you need help, you ask for help. If things are going great, you say great job. So, but we have this culture where it's you share the good news, you don't share the bad news. There's a great example from Alan Mulally when he took over Ford, and all the KPIs were in green and the company was losing billions. And it took him like 3 or 4 meetings before anybody just changed and was honest about the results. And they all needed help, but they didn't dare to ask for. So transparent is about just like you are with your friends, with your family. You just say, I have a problem, I need some help. And you cannot imagine how difficult it is for people to say, I need help. And let's work as a team. Again, I love sports. I also come with very sports background. And if you need help, you ask your team and they will do it, right? And I can, but in businesses, somehow everything becomes very opaque and it just hits the performance obviously and creates a culture of always good news, which is just not true. So transparency is kind of, I don't know, it's the glue that puts everything together. If you're not transparent, video will not work.
I worked in a very toxic public organization for quite
Yeah.
some time, and I used to do this as a kind of a joke. I
Oh.
didn't last there very long, Antonio. But I used to they had meeting rooms throughout the organization, and I used to write on as we were leaving on like flip charts or or whiteboards. I'd
Oh,
write
yeah.
Project Thunderbolt, right? And
Yeah.
just leave it up there. And then I wanted to see, did it come back around? And like later on, I'd hear from people saying, "Hey, do you know anything about Project Thunderbolt?" And I was like, "No, no," that's because I wanted to see how paranoid the
People.
organization was. And you say in the book here, in many companies, information about transformation projects is silo, fragmented,
Mhm.
and often contradictory. And I thought about this where you talk about in these PDOs, if you were a really well cultured project oriented organization, you use your town halls and you use those moments for both mentioning failure. So
Yeah.
somebody might have failed, but in the pursuit of excellence, or to share the projects that are going across the organization. Because
Exactly.
again, like the Mulally example, somebody might have seen that before and go, hey, I can actually help there. We've had the same issue before. I'd love you to share a bit about that because that opens it up. Because most people just use these ask me anything sessions as a
Yeah.
kind of a monologue, but they can be something totally different.
Yeah, for me, it's what you just said. Is when you have a town hall or when you have a steering committee or communication, start with the things that don't go very well. Start with the things where you need help. Have you ever heard any CEO or senior executive, I need help. I need you guys to work together on this? No, they don't say, because asking for help is like you're weak or you're a loser. And on the contrary, is what you were just saying, is that starting with this communication just creates more trust on you as a leader, on you, on the focus and the priorities. So insisting on these are the top three things that we need to deliver in the next 6 months. And I want you to put an effort on that. And I'm here also to support you. If you that makes such a speech less corporate and more human. And that's what you need in a PDO. PDO projects are made by people. And if the people trust you and you need to stop a project because there's a good, they will be okay as long as you're transparent and you share the reasons why we need to stop it, what we learned, and where we're moving next. And it's so obvious that sometimes when we chat about this, and now with you, I then say, but come on, I'm saying something new, or it's just incredible that we need to be talking about this, but it's so important. Thank you for bringing that.
Okay, man. I heard what you said. You said when a project's 90%, it's good enough,
Yeah.
and finishing early is finishing well.
Oh, wow.
So I
You go
have
ahead.
I have a key little point I wanted to share, just a little excerpt from the book. But as I'm doing that, I'd love you to think about your final message for audience. And I'm
Okay.
just going to remind the audience as well. I have a copy of the book up for
Thank
grabs. Just be in the Substack, the Innovation Show Substack. It's under the Thursday Thought on Substack, and I'll share in the notes. And also, Antonio, I'm going to ask where people can find you. But I love what you wrote here. And I usually pick out an excerpt from the book that I love. And you wrote, leadership transparency in project governance does not mean handing over every decision to consensus. I think that's so important. It means being explicit about how decisions are made, what data is used, and how progress will be measured. It means sharing what's working and what is not working early and often. And most importantly, it means modeling the behaviors such as admitting uncertainty, correcting course, and celebrating learning that make transparency sustainable. Absolutely love that. To you, man. First, where can people find you?
Always easy, LinkedIn, Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez. My website is the same, antonionieto-rodriguez.com. I think that's the two ways. And I love every time somebody reach out, I always respond with comments or feedback, whatever. I love that. And it's hard to say more things, Aidan. I think you just summarized it very well. If you're a leader, I think people are looking for you in a different way than they did in the past. So don't be afraid, move out of the comfort zone, spend more time on the transformation space. The legacy that you're going to leave is based on the changes that you're making now. It's not what you did in the past. And that means spending time on transformation, building that culture where everything works as co-creation. The teams are empowered, and you're somebody that orchestrates and like you said, take decisions, but let the team also take most of them. And if you're in a transformation team or transformation lead, step up, please. I think you have the right to ask. You have the right to take the things that you need for your project to be successful. You all know why projects fail. You all know why transformation. Don't let failure happen again and again because you are afraid of speaking up and asking what you need. It will make a huge difference. And last one, Aidan, think people first, even in projects. When you have a team, and we know what's the difference between a group of people and a team of committed people, spend the time, create that team, and things will go just flying and people will love you. So that's all. And I really thank you, Aidena. You're so well prepared. I think I've never been in an interview with somebody so well prepared.
Good project management, man.
Yeah. I love it.
As is finishing early, and I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your family holiday, well-deserved family holiday, to spend it
Thank
with
you.
us. So very, very grateful. Author of Powered by Projects, Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez. Thank you for joining us.
Gracias.
Thanks as always to our sponsor, Kyndryl, who runs and reimagines the technology systems that drive advantage for the world's leading businesses with a unique blend of AI-powered consulting built on unmatched managed service capability. Kyndryl helps leaders harness the power of technology for smarter decisions, faster innovation, and a lasting competitive edge. You can find out more about Kyndryl and the Kyndryl Institute at kyndryl.kyndryl.com.